Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Lots of controversial stuff going on in the world today. That last show that I did with Johnny has caused a lot of reverberation to happen, and other people have been commenting on what he was saying. And I think today's guest will take that even further. Today we're talking to Daniel Estulin. He is the guy who brought us the Bilderbergers. He's the guy that told us that the Bilderbergers existed and revealed who they were and what they were doing. And he's written a lot of other great books, and he's just one of the most informed people that I've ever seen in my life. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, so, oh, there's so much to cover here. So I'm just going to start out with the number one question, since you're so aware of what's going on in the world today. What do you make of this current crisis that we're going through right now? Let's just cut to the quick.
Well, the long and the short of it is what we're seeing is as a change from the fifth techno paradigm to the sixth techno paradigm. Beyond that, and needless to say, we're going to expand that in the interview, but another thing we're seeing is that today, we are looking globally at our global debt, if you had all the debts and then obligations, to about $4 quadrillion. That's the global debt. Now, I've for years warned people about the enormous risks, in the financial system that inevitably will lead to the collapse. The collapse is here. And Jay, as the bubbles continue to grow for over 10 years since the last crisis in 2006, 2009, very few people understood that this was just a rehearsal for what's coming right now. The governments, by printing and lending $140 trillion since 2006, they've just exacerbated this problem. Now it's become exponentially more difficult to deal with. So spring 2020, we're now in the month of May. Debts, unfounded liabilities, derivatives. We're looking at about $2.5 quadrillion. Some say 3, some say 4. It doesn't really matter. This is the sum that is impossible to fathom. But just so people understand, it's about 30 times global GDP, which gives you an idea that it is absolutely impossible to pay this thing off. So because it's impossible to pay it off, if you're the global elite, how do you get rid of this? Because again, what we're seeing right now is not a collapse of a sector of an economy. It's not the subprime or the Lehman Brothers collapse, as they, erroneously called it way back when. Okay, that was just the first, death toll of this global systemic collapse we're seeing right now. If you're the elite, the only way you can actually deal with this $4 quadrillion debt, and so people understand, this is 4 and 15 zeros. There's no way you can possibly print your way out of this anymore. So the elite understood that the only way they can actually write this off is via what's called force majeure, which is some kind of a naturally occurring or supernaturally occurring event. Could be, a meteorite hitting the planet Earth. It could be, the enormous tsunami that'll wipe out half of the world's population. It could be, space aliens coming to say hello. It could be a thermonuclear war or some kind of a coronavirus. They tried their tack with the nuclear war. And when they killed Soleimani in Iran on the 3rd of January, 2020. I mean, the Middle East is perfect for any kind of confluence of interests. You have Israel and the nuclear weapons on the one hand, and on the other you have the Arabs and oil. I mean, you can't think of a more, spontaneous combustion off is via thermonuclear war. You wash your hands and start the whole thing over again. And in the Middle East, you have the Israelis, the Turks, Iran is there, the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, everyone is there. But nobody wanted a thermonuclear war because the consequences for us and for the elite are dire. So then they came up with Plan B, and Plan B was coronavirus, which again, I'm a doctor of conceptual intelligence, Jay. It means that we create models that define the future. 2014, I predicted it. It's in my book and in my interviews. People can go online and see it. 2014, 8 months before Trump said, I want to run for president, we said Trump was going to be president of the United States. Because Trump is not a person, he's an alternative global project. So to go back to your original question, what is happening right now? What is happening has nothing to do with something because someone ate a bat somewhere in Wuhan. It doesn't even matter, whether it's the Chinese or the Americans or the British or the space aliens, who put this thing out there. It makes no difference. The point is, from a conceptual, vantage point, is to understand that because the world in a state of systemic collapse, in other words, the entire global economy is collapsing, the elite needed somehow to shirk their responsibility and put this off on someone else, blame someone else. And one of the ways to do it, as I said, is thermonuclear war. It didn't work out. Their plan B was coronavirus. But we're seeing the consequences of this global collapse. And that's one. And the second point, again, this is a change because we've gone from industrial economy to post-industrial, and now we're in the trans-industrial, which means that the previous techno paradigm, the post-industrial economy, the bankers, the financiers, all these other people, they're out. They no longer make money for the elite. And so they needed to dismantle that techno paradigm. And now we're going to the next new higher techno paradigm, higher energy flux density. And this is what the coronavirus thing is all about. Let's forget about who is responsible, whether it came out of the lab in Wuhan. It doesn't make a difference because you and I will never know. We can never know because the only people who actually know are the intelligence agencies of the United States, of Great Britain, of Israel, of Russia, of China, of Germany, and maybe someone else. So whatever it is that comes out is filtered through to make us think something which has nothing to do with reality.
I agree. So I may be wrong in my assessment, but it seems to me that Trump is representing some third force here that is not clearly definable, as if he's not really working for the globalists, it doesn't appear, or is he just a gatekeeper for the globalists?
That's a very good question. I explained it in great detail in my last book, which came out 3 years ago now, called The Shadows of the Presidency. I explain who Trump is. Trump is not a person, but I'm not saying that he's an alien from Mars or from Alpha. What I'm saying is he's a face of an alternative global project. Let me explain.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be very brief because this is the economy and maybe people don't understand anything about the economy. But it's important to understand. If you look back, if you go back to the 19th century, we had 4 different economic models. We had the British model, we had the German, the Prussian model after the war with France, we had the American economic model at the end of the 19th century, and then we had the Japanese economic model at the beginning of the 20th century after the war with Tsarist Russia in 1904, 1905. These 4 economic models became 2 at the end of World War II. One was capitalist West, and the other one was Soviet socialist East and the satellites. You had the capitalist and you had the socialist. And these 2 models, they coexisted. There was parity between them in the 3 key areas that we can define parity. One, in certain aspects, the comfort was obviously a point in favor of the West. Social welfare, that was the point in favor of the Soviet regime and the satellites. Demographically speaking, we're very similar. The Soviet Union at the time had about 350 million, the United States about 220, but they were more or less the same if you had all the other countries. And then and so these 2 economic models coexisted between 1944 and 1989, if you want to talk about the fall of the Berlin Wall, or 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Okay, and then in 1991, these 2 models, they joined and became one global model.
Right.
And between 1991 and 2006, 2007, you had this, what they call, the new American century.
Right.
This global liberal banking financier model. When I say liberal, I'm not talking liberalism from a traditional point of view or classical point of view of Voltaire.
Right.
I'm talking about the parasitical, money grubbing, living at somebody else's expense model. Right. So this global liberal banking financier model encompassed the entire world, because whether it's up until 1991, the capitalist West controlled 60% of the global economy, and the Soviet Union is 40%. When in the 1980s, the West realized that because they've reached the limit to their economic space, which was the West, they couldn't expand any longer. Okay, they understand that they needed to conquer the Soviet Union and their space in order to be able to survive. Why is that? Because again, when we talk capitalism, people need to understand capitalism is finite and needs perpetual expansion.
Yes,
in the capitalist world, the cost of innovation is included in the cost of production. In other words, if you invent a new smartphone, be it, I don't know, Samsung 16 or Apple 24 or whatever model is out there, I have no idea. Okay, you, the consumer, will pay for this future innovation. It'll be included in the cost of what you're paying for the product today. Okay, so for this reason, capitalism needs expansion of the markets, and the markets are finite. Therefore, the globalism is finite, and the model is finite. And so, in the late 1970s, early 1980s, the West began experiencing serious difficulties because they've reached the limits to their territorial control. And by conquering the Soviet space and it joining or merging with the West, becoming one global model, the West got a new lease on life between 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and 2006, 2007. In 2007, we came up again to the same problem that they faced in the early 1980s. That because they've conquered the Soviet space and they ate that space and they've expanded the maximum amount into that space, in 2006, they suddenly realized they had nowhere else to expand. And this is where we're at today. So again, went from 4 models to 2 models to 1 model in 1991, and now we're at the 0 models. We don't have an economic model. And if between 1944 and 1991, the fight between capitalism and socialism, in 1991, with the disappearance of the socialist bloc, this fight was turned inward within the capitalist bloc between the financiers. These are the people who play with numbers in the computer. These are the parasites. This is Wall Street. This is the financial apparatus. These are the enemies of Donald Trump. Financiers on the one hand, and the industrialists, isolationists, nationalists on the other.
Right.
And Donald Trump is simply the face of this alternative group. And what is very important to understand, Donald Trump is not an American president. He doesn't represent the Republican Party, because I remind you that most of the heavyweights within the Republican ranks, they voted for Hillary Clinton.
They did.
Bush father, Bush son, Romney, McCain, etc., etc. Why did they vote for alleged enemy? Because there's no such thing as Republican or Democratic Party.
Right.
There's no such thing as Liberal Party of Canada and Conservative Party of Canada, as Green Party of Canada or Party of Canada. All of the parties globally, the entire spectrum of all the parties in the world today are run under the umbrella of the liberal banking financier establishment. And so when we're looking at Donald Trump, and people are saying, well, Trump is nuts. He's fighting with Prime Minister of Canada. He's fighting with Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany. He's fighting with the former Prime Minister of England, Theresa May. He's fighting with Macron in France. He sits down for breakfast with the General Director or Secretary of NATO, and he gives him a dressing down. He does the same with the International Monetary Fund. These are our friends. They are not your friends. These are all sworn enemies of Donald Trump, because he's an alternative global project. Which is why what we're seeing right now is a desperate attempt on the part of the liberal banking financier global order, an order that today finds itself on its deathbed, because their model is dead, and their model is based on infinite expansion. And the only thing that they know how to do is print money. But because the printing press, in other words, the emission center, the little machine that prints money in the United States, is today under the control of Donald Trump, the enemy of the liberal banking financiers globally. Their only way out, because they have no other way, because again, if you look at any kind of a linear progression, today's crisis, the liberal financiers are on their deathbed. And now they knew that, with Trump winning the elections now, and we saw this yesterday, now the game has really turned in his favor, because now it's no longer Russiagate, it's Obamagate. And Trump is going to go after Obama, after the Comeys, after the Clintons, after the Bill Gateses. And these people, if Trump wins the re-election, the Soroses, of course he will. They are as good as dead. And so their only last desperate attempt to somehow get the game back is to overturn the table and via chaos, because they tried thermonuclear war. That tack didn't work. And via overturning the table and getting this global mess and collapse, up and going, they're hoping to regain the initiative. Because again, if you look at who is Fauci, who is World Health Organization, they're all part of the liberal banking financier cartel. Because if anybody out there thinks that World Health Organization, WHO, is actually works in favor of humanity, I got some amazing real estate on the moon I can sell you with great views of the Lake Ontario.
So you're saying that Trump is part of this. You're helping me out to understand this a lot, by the way. You're saying that Trump is part of this alternative thing, but isn't the COVID actually playing into Trump's hands? Because we're being taught that globalism actually caused all of this. And more people are turning anti-globalist because of the virus than there were before. So is the COVID virus playing into
the game is played on a lot of different levels. Okay. One of the things that, for example, what we're seeing right now is the end of the model. If we think that we can get back to globalism over the next few months or the next few years, okay, people have absolutely no idea what this is. This is the absolute end of the world that we've seen before. Never again are we getting back to anything that resembled our lives before 31 December 2019. Globalism died on 9/11. And it was officially pronounced dead in Crimea in 2014 because Crimea rejoined Russian Federation. We got slapped with sanctions, blockade. Whereas before it was cheaper to buy stuff from somebody else, with Crimea, everyone suddenly realized that the cheapest way to actually do something is get it done yourself. So that's why globalism died. What is globalism? It's free movement of people, of products, of finances, of services. None of these things no longer exist. The world without borders is dead. So again, what we had before is never coming back. And it means collapse of absolutely every segment of the economy. It means collapse and loss of wealth, of property, monies, stocks, bonds, any kind of investment. Because again, this is not a collapse of a sector of the economy. This is a systemic collapse. And in fact, Jay, what we're seeing today, we've only seen twice in the last 2,000 years. The first time, when the old Roman Empire collapsed between the 4th and the 6th century. Actually, they say it collapsed in 476. It really collapsed in 500 and in 550. Of our era, because when did the Roman Empire collapse? When the technology stopped working. In other words, the aqueducts.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and the second time we've seen this, and then so the old order collapsed and feudalism became the norm. And the second time between the 16th and the 17th centuries, when feudalism died and capitalism became the system. And what we're seeing today is because we have no model to define the future. We have no idea what this new model is going to look like. Okay, we're faced with a situation where if you have no model, this vacuum is going to be filled with extreme violence. And we're seeing this violence all over the world. And again, does it play to Trump's hands? Again, everybody, these people who are playing right now, these are global players. Because again, if you kind of think of it, it's not about countries. It's about global projects. And Trump, when I said earlier, he's not even an American president. Most people are going to say this guy is nuts. I'm not nuts. What does that mean he's not an American president? Donald Trump doesn't represent the United States. If you kind of think of what's going to happen post-Trump winning the elections in 2020, you're going to have these great global powers who will have to sit down at the proverbial round table and discuss this post-world and what it's going to look like. In other words, we're looking at Yalta II, Versailles II, Bretton Woods II, call it whatever you want. But the point is, whether it's with the first Yalta agreement, when Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin sat down to actually discuss in February 1945 the new rules of engagement in the post-World War II world, that was easy. You had countries who won and countries who lost. But today, there's not between countries, it's between economic models On the one hand, you have this global parasitical liberal banking financier establishment, which has lived at the expense of others. Because again, if you kind of look at the economy,
Absolutely.
you can have a closed system, you have an open system. What does that mean? Okay, so the people understand. An open system, when you steal from someone else. This is what the British Empire has done. This is what the Spanish Empire has done. This is what the United States has done. The barrel of the gun via the color revolutions, etc., bringing democracies to all the corners of the universe. Okay, but that's over because there's nowhere else to grow. You can't steal anything anymore because no one has anything left to steal. So because you can't steal things from others, you only have one option, and that's the real economy, which is a much smaller economy.
Right.
Okay, and this is what we're doing right now. They are collapsing the post-industrial speculative economy. And they're creating a new trans-industrial, and I'll explain it interesting from the technological point of view. But what's important here is this. When they finally sit down to discuss this post-globalized world, you're going to have Putin representing Russia, you're going to have Modi representing India, you're going to have Xi Jinping, the emperor of China. Okay, he's not the president. I don't understand why people talk about democracy in China. This is a 5,000-year-old civilization. They have never been a democracy, not for 1 second of the entire existence. Okay, then you're gonna have the United States. The question is, you have a chair that says USA. Who is gonna sit there? It should be the president of the United States, except the president of the United States is at war within not only the United States but globally. Against the global liberal banking financier apparatus. So until Trump wins, and he will win because he's done remarkably well in 3 years and a half of having the entire global establishment, whether you call it the deep state or whatever you want to call it, okay? The entire, because again, who are these people against Trump? You have Hollywood, Silicon Valley, the intelligence establishment of the entire world. You have the American media and global media. You have American bureaucracy and global bureaucracy. You have every financial institution in the world because, again, it's all based on printing unlimited amount of money and redistributing among others at the expense of real growth of the economy and, needless to say, real sector. And Trump has dealt with all of these and methodically has been dismantling them because, again, when Trump became president, and I explained it in my book, In the Shadows of the Presidency, he came with 2 objectives, very clearly defined objectives. One, dismantling Bretton Woods, which is a system of his enemies.
I agree.
And the second, dismantling petrodollar, which is, again, a system of his enemies based, the cornerstone of that system was the agreement between the liberal banking financier United States and the Saudis. When I say the liberal banking, I'm not talking about the Republicans. I'm not talking about the Democrats. I'm talking about the foreign interests. And then you have global interests. And these global interests are run by global projects and supranational elite, because these are the people who play at this global table. So again, Trump doesn't represent right now the United States because, again, he is half Scot, half German. And that's a different global project from the United States, which today is still to be defined and decided who wins this, tug of war, whether Trump or the liberal banking financiers who are doing this with coronavirus, okay, because it works, the only option that they have. Nuclear war would have been wonderful because you can kill 5 billion people. These people don't care. I mean, they all have their $100 million bunkers. You know what I mean? You kill 5 billion people, you reorganize everything on a much smaller scale. Okay, you also get rid of a very important problem that they don't know what to do with. In the new techno paradigm, you don't need people. It's artificial intelligence, it's robotics, it's all this other stuff that doesn't include people, which means that what do you do with 7 billion people?
What do you do?
What do you do with 90% of the population? Well, you kill them, but they tried. They haven't been able to universal basic income. But this is just a stopgap, Jay, because they can't afford to pay $2,000 a month to 7 billion people on the planet Earth. Okay, adjusted because in Sri Lanka, they don't make 2,000, they make $2. But it's not the point. The point is, this is a stopgap. They gotta figure out. And also we, as people, have to figure out what is it that we do better than robots, because if we can't, okay, they'll simply re-engineer us out of the system.
That's right. That's what they're doing. You can see that's the end game here, that you'd rather have robots because they don't get sick. And so this is where they're going. There's no doubt about it. Is it true? I've heard these rumors that Trump has taken over the Fed. Is that true?
It's a very interesting point. Has Trump taken over the Fed? It's not that he has taken over the Fed, but what Trump has done is actually made the Fed work for the economy, for the real sector instead of the financial sector. Because again, if you kind of look at the sectors of the economy, 70% of the economy is run or controlled by the liberal banking financiers. These are the parasitical order who plays with numbers on the computer, who don't provide or offer anything, to us that we could possibly need.
They cannot produce anything.
And only 30% of the economy is actually is controlled, ago. By forcing the Federal Reserve pay and back the real sector of the economy, he has effectively taken control of the Federal Reserve, which is a very important victory for Donald Trump as well. But another aspect linked to that, Jay, is this whole U.S.-China deal. How the money works in this equation, who actually the Chinese and the Americans work for, are they different teams? Is there going to be a war between them? This is all part of the same thing.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. So the reset that we're going through is not in concrete yet. You're saying it's still liquid, and they still haven't figured out what the next step is.
Nobody has a plan. What's bad about this is that for the first time in history, we don't have an alternative model in place. And if you kind of look at previous techno paradigms, we went from fourth, which is industrial, to fifth, which is post-industrial. Okay, so the engineers, the architects, they became passé, and suddenly the bankers, the financiers, the white collar, the lawyers and the insurance agents and the actuaries, they suddenly became the it crowd, and everybody else was a loser. Right. Well, the it crowd today is out; they're gone. Okay, all of them are going to lose everything because their wealth, which is young money, is in zeros and ones. It's in the stock market. And because this whole thing is being re-engineered, the stock market is going to go to zero, which is where it belongs.
Yep.
Which means that all of these people's wealth is going to be down to zero.
So then we're going to have to go back to a more simple life. Is that what you're saying, or what?
Are we going to go back to a more simple life? I don't know. What do you mean by more simple life? I'm going to be like living. Are we going to be living in caves? Is that what you mean, or?
No, I mean, we're going to have, we already are having the first signs of gigantic food shortages. And I personally believe they're going to use starvation as one of their weapons against us. And so I'm wondering if maybe people should think about growing food and taking care of their families and maybe backing out of the world a little bit.
Well, starvation, as needless to say, is going to be a very important element of what's coming. Not because they want to starve you to death, but because the global chains are broken. Okay, you simply can't get food to stores. Like, for example, it's cheaper for you to load whatever it is that you want to load in Africa. I don't care what port you're in, whether you're in Ethiopia or it doesn't matter where. Bring that, whatever it is that you're bringing by boat, cross the Atlantic to the port of New York. It's cheaper, this whole trip, than it is to unload in the port of New York and bring food to the store. Which means that any big city in America, or in Canada, or in the Western world, only has 4 days of supplies. Then what happens? What happens is that the trucks stop moving, which means that you run out of food, which means you have no gas, which means that you can't get food to people, which means you have riots. The police can only stop this for so long, because before millions of people who are hungry will overwhelm the police. And then you have chaos. So living in a big city is insane, especially in times of global collapse. Does that mean people have to go live in the countryside? It's impossible, because 99% of people have never in their entire lives planted a seed. They don't know how to plant a tomato. Exactly. They have no idea how, they think food comes from the store. They think food is pizza, or Domino's or McDonald's. Okay, that's called, but that's not going to be an option in the future. I mean, you can store up on food, but what you're going to do? You're going to store up in what, 2-3 months, and then what?
Exactly.
Food runs out. Water, you have no water. What do you do? Because the thing when you're talking about technology, when you're talking about infrastructure, that's a very important point. When you build infrastructure, you start with, how do I explain it? You know, a product first is exclusive. Let me give you an example. You take a smartphone, okay? You know, with a smartphone, remember back in the 1990s, I had my first smartphone, like, I think back in 1999. There was a thing like,
Yes.
so proud having this thing. It looks, you know, thinking back to smartphones because it's exclusive. And then the next step is this exclusive becomes, you know, common use because people get it. And only when a large section of the population actually has a phone do governments invest in infrastructure. That's how it works, which is why over time, you know, the phones, you know, the cell lines were getting further and further, and suddenly little towns and villages, you know, totally out of the way, we're getting phone lines, okay, our smartphones or our telephones. But when the collapse happens, the process works in reverse. The first thing that goes, because the governments have no money, the first thing that goes is the infrastructure, because it's very expensive to maintain and, you know, the upkeep on the infrastructure. The second thing that collapses is the fact that mass use of an object. Because if you have no infrastructure, you have no use for smartphone because you can't call anyone. And the next thing that goes, we're back to the way it was initially. Few people have it because they can afford the infrastructure. And so the point with the collapse, this is what happens. So when you're looking at, for example, China as an example, that has built 100,000 kilometers of roads. Just so you understand, it costs $1 million per year for upkeep of 1 kilometer of a road. That's the cost, which is why when you see in Toronto, you know, they're constantly working on the roads and people saying, oh, it's the mafia, you know, getting the money. Part of it obviously is the mafia getting their part, you know, of the public budget, but also because of, you know, extreme weather conditions in Toronto. It could be 10 degrees one day, it could be -5 the next, it could be 20 a week from now. It destroys the roads. So the point is, you know, if you have 100,000 kilometers of roads and it costs $1 million per kilometer per year, you need to find $100 billion a year in cash just to, you know, for the upkeep of the roads. And for example, in the United States, they don't have that money, which is why roads, bridges collapse, infrastructure collapses. Why? Because you need a lot of money to maintain infrastructure.
I know you're right. I know you're right, because a guy who works on roads told me that if he stopped working on repairing the roads, that they would all be completely destroyed within 2 years.
Well, of course, which is why, again, you need always to, you know, for the upkeep. And the upkeep is 1 kilometer, $1 million.
Absolutely.
That's the cost. It may be 900,000, doesn't matter, for easy calculation. The point is, when you get to that point and the government has no money for infrastructure, it's not only the roads. Infrastructure is, for example, power lines. It's, you know, it's the actual, you know, light to the houses. And so, like, for example, the other day, my dad said that Toronto, you know, it was left in the dark for like something like 12 hours. It was a power outage because you have 4 or 5 million people in Toronto, all sitting at home, all using internet at the same time. And the grid simply can't take that. So when the power goes, suddenly you have no water. And so this is the infrastructure. This is part of the generalized collapse we're seeing right now. So the point is, yes, is it better to be, you know, to live in a big city? I probably not. Because when power goes out, crime goes up. You know, when crime goes up, it overwhelms the entire grid. Is it better to live in a country? You can't, because you don't know how to plant a seed, which means you're going to be dead before you learn. And so the point is that what do you do now? You try to fix what's broken, but you can't fix what's broken because it's a systemic collapse. And we have no model, because the question is, and then what? Then nothing. We have no model to replace what's broken. And so the problem is, for the first time in history, we are witnessing this. Never in the entire history of mankind have we come to a point where one system collapsed and there was nothing to replace it with, which is why it is so vital for Trump to win. I'm not pro-Trump or against Trump for that matter, okay? I couldn't care less. I'm not American. But Trump needs to win because they need to sit down with other global powers and to define this future world. And most importantly, write a new economic model post-globalism, whatever that will be.
So you think they're going to go global digital currency or something?
Digital currencies is not a model, okay? It's just an element of how the system would work, okay? Probably, but then what? And then what? You have to understand that what we're seeing right now, again, I want to remind you what I said about technology. We've gone from fourth, which is industrial economy, to fifth techno paradigm, which is post-industrial. Financial technology, IT, entertainment, telecommunications, all the stuff related to banking, finance, etc. And now into the sixth, which is trans-industrial economy. What does that mean? It means robotics. It means artificial intelligence. It means virtual reality. It means additive technologies, which is like 3D printing and stuff. Which means and big convergence, which is nano, bio, info, cogno, etc. And then in about a generation, maybe about 10 years from now, or 12, we're going to go to the seventh techno paradigm, which is men, machines, real transhumanism, fusion, helium-3 bases on the moon, etc., etc. Yep. So if you kind of look again, so the fourth techno paradigm was engineers and architects. And they were industrialists. They were replaced by lawyers and bankers and effective managers, accountants, financiers. All these people are going to be jobless. They have absolutely nothing to offer to the new world. They all have to look for a job.
Good.
Fifth paradigm was, luxury goods, services, cell phones. Like, in Toronto, we have this big mall called Yorkdale. And when I was living in Canada back in the early 1990s and the late 1980s, I mean, it was a crappy shopping mall on the way out. And then when I came back to Canada in 2016, I couldn't believe the luxury of the place. And of course, it was built up because of this enormous flood of, very wealthy Chinese consumers. Because again, China is 1.5 billion people. 1 billion of them live still using technology from the 19th century agriculture. If people say to you, well, why does 1 billion Chinese peasants still using technology from the 19th century? Because if you gave them technology from the 20th, 500 million of those people would be unemployed. And what do you do with 500 million people who have nothing to do? You can't kill them. Well, you don't, which is why the Chinese still keep using, a hoe and a shovel. And this is their technology. But you still have about a 250 million population base who have a lot of money, who are middle class, who are upper middle class. There's more millionaires in China than it is anywhere else in the world, although they keep it to themselves. So the point is, these people came to Canada, they were buying up all the stuff and all these, luxury shopping centers, luxury goods, luxury services, gold-plated cell phones, mass infrastructure. It was all done for them, mass tourism. All of this is gone. It is never coming back. Most of these malls will fail because there's going to be no one to buy this stuff. And so this difference, this change from the fifth to sixth paradigm is going to be a very cataclysmical and very brusque and very violent. What's important to understand is, again, can we build a new world based on all these circumstances? I don't know the answer to that question. How are we going to build this? We have to define it, but it's going to be a very different world from the world we're used to seeing right now. Because again, if you look at all the stuff about all this technology stuff happening right now, okay, a key element of coronavirus is the sixth techno paradigm. Look what the elite have done. Look how they flipped the script. Remember in the US elections, Bernie Sanders was talking about, minimum wage, what is like $15 or I don't know what it is. I think it was $15 minimum wage. And it's gone. It's forgotten. Nobody's talking about this. Today, people are happy to have a job. Having a job today becomes a privilege. So what we're seeing is a destruction of service economy. And coronavirus, more than anything else, is a direct hit against the middle class. The middle class, which is actually the people who make the economy work, is going to disappear completely. And the reforms we're seeing right now, especially in the tech sector, this sixth technological paradigm, it's going to be at the cost of the middle class. So what does this new paradigm mean? Which coronavirus served, as a perfect excuse, or as a cover story, I should say. Well, one is distance learning. Universities are closed, schools are closed, everybody's learning at home on the computer. This is going to become the norm.
Absolutely.
In the sixth techno paradigm, you don't need universities.
That's right.
You don't need physical space where people go and learn. And that's also as a knock-on effect. For example, in Canada, a lot of smaller cities of about 200, 300, 400,000 people have universities. University in the city of London, Ontario, Kitchener, Waterloo, all these places have universities. And the entire dynamic of a city which has grown to be a city of, medium-sized city of up to 500,000 people was based on the interworkings of the university. If the university crowd is gone, meaning 20, 30,000 students who don't go to universities, who don't run places, who don't buy coffees from Starbucks, all if they're gone, which means the entire knock-on effect, the entire city collapses.
And that's coming.
And this is going to happen globally in the United States, in Canada. Absolutely. So this, again, so distance learning is one key element of this new six techno paradigm: robotics, artificial intelligence, economic structure not dependent on human labor, virtual world, which is a world of compatibility. There's no longer a need for physical moving from space one to space two. You and I want to have a meeting, we put our, virtual reality, headsets, and we have our meeting in Fiji on the island. In fact, close.
Let me ask you a question then, because we had a guest on recently who said that he had received information that they're going to make the vaccines mandatory and they're going to place CRISPR technology in the vaccines to reshape our genome and take out aggressive genes and genes that cause cancer and things like that, and that we're going to be a completely different race by 2030. That's what he said. It caused a lot of controversy when he said it, but other people, since he's been on my show, have come forth and said the same thing, including Dr. Andy Kaufman. So I was just wondering, have you heard anything like that?
I have heard, but again, I'm not a virologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a specialist in the field. I'm someone who spent 24 years in military counterintelligence. Someone who has a doctorate degree in conceptual intelligence. So I can put things together conceptually and predict what's going to happen in the future. This makes perfect sense because, again, within this six techno paradigm, key role is artificial intelligence in all aspects of our lives. And we're talking about artificial intelligence in our bodies. So it's not about drones, it's not about robots, it's rather a new philosophy of creating an ambience that doesn't depend on people. And if you can replace people with, transhumans or posthumans by augmenting our bodies, by changing our DNA, this is actually quite interesting. For example, technologies of the six techno paradigm, they're open technologies. For the longest time, Jay, they were closed, like patents, top secret, Pentagon papers, robotechnical. So why did the global elite suddenly allow this technology to be seen? Well, because they were pursuing this new techno paradigm and progress, and they needed people to develop the technologies, which is what we've done. And another thing, I remind you that up until 2013, more or less, everyone talked about DNA sequencing in order to build a better human. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, and then it suddenly disappeared. Why? Well, because this is the project of the seventh techno paradigm. Men, machines, biotechnology, meta languages, space bases, deep sea cities, etc. What's coming? Absolutely forced vaccination. What's coming? Microchips as early warning systems, okay, to prevent next wave of daily virus. That's what they're going to sell to us. Big data, new electronic passports, because you're going to need to offer proof, okay, that you've been vaccinated and you're not a danger to the society. This is what they're already proposing in Holland. This is what they're proposing in Germany. This is what they're proposing in Spain. This is what they're proposing in France. And this is what's actually on the agenda in England. So for you to buy food, to get married, to get a bank credit, to take money out of the bank on your credit card, you're going to have an electronic passport up to date. And needless to say, that's what's up. That's control over everyone. And it's amazing, how in weeks we have given up freedom in exchange for nothing. But again, those people, those of us, of you have read my book on builders. Okay, it's so much. I talk about this very secret, not secret organization, that kinds of different things. No, it's not that at all. It's the fact that we brought out to light a greater agenda that these people had. Because one of the key elements that I explain in my book, okay, on the Bilderbergers, is this next generation or so, this pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorships without tears, so to speak. So it's producing a kind of, this is Huxley, okay, he talked about this in the 1960s, producing kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it because they'll be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. Today, it came out that 9 out of 10 Britons, they welcome the fact that they've been isolated, or in other words, imprisoned. And in Canada, it's pretty much the same thing. 82% of Canadians applaud the government's attempts to vaccinate the entire population. And this is the final revolution. If you read H.G. Wells, okay, this is not a conspiracy. It's a one world brain functioning as a policy of the mind. But you know what? In order to have a concentration camp without tears, you must have control, communications, and feedback, which is why the government is always there, making sure that communication coming, schools are concerned about children's well-being, they're looking for feedback. And that's where cybernetics comes in, as the behavior of whole complex systems known today as social engineering. It's a living history of social engineering that concerns me, which is one of the reasons I explained it in my other book on Tavistock Institute, and how it evolved from old-fashioned electroshock therapy to modern-day group shock therapy. And this was done way back when by MIT Research Center for Group Dynamics, Tavistock Institute, as a kind of a forefront of research into the subject of consensus through group dynamics. One thing that empire builders, such as David Rockefeller, they've always known that persuasion is key to setting up fascist movements. And that's one of the reasons why initially, going back to the 1950s, these oligarchical foundations were investing exorbitant sums of money on cybernetics, and why the same foundations today are spending billions on social networking technologies. Why? To change what people believe and what they do.
So you're a smart guy. What do you see at the end of what's the end game here? Or are you saying you don't even have an idea of where we're headed?
Well, we don't know for one very simple reason. We don't have a model. What's this world going to look like? That's the first question. Well, because the concept of nation state, like Catherine Austin Fitts, she calls it, global 1.0.
Yep.
That's the world from 1648, that's Westphalia Agreement, to about the late 1960s of the 20th century. That's global 1.0. Countries, borders, nation states, constitutions, et cetera, et cetera. And then in the late 1960s, the Bilderbergers, in fact, at their Bilderberg conference in Mont-Tremblant, on the outskirts of Montreal in the province of Quebec in Canada, they came up in their 1968 meeting with another concept called One World Company Limited. In other words, corporations that have more power than any government on the planet. And so today we have, we have JP Morgan, we have Goldman Sachs, et cetera, et cetera.
For sure.
And then they had a new concept, this post-industrial world. That's global 3.0. That's about, early 1980s with Reaganomics, et cetera. And now in global 4.0, trans-industrial. And what we don't know is how will this world dynamic change in a new world with a different model? Because of the concept of nation state no longer works, because it can't work. Because, a unipolar world is gone, multipolar world is gone. What do we have right now? Do we have any nodes? What are they? Before you had, the capitalist West and the socialist East, then that disappeared, became a global unipolar model. And now we're back in multipolar. Where are these multipoles? What are they? Well, what they will be in the near future is most likely Eurasian Union is going to be one. That's one of the reasons why they're going after China, and not Trump, because Trump and Xi Jinping and Putin, they're one team. They're the same team. There's no war between the United States and China. It's a cover story. But still, at this point, we don't have multipoles. But we will have them in the future. But what it does mean is that a nation state, a concept of what we have up to now, is going to be replaced with regionalization of global economies.
Right.
Now, if you regionalize, you need a minimum population base. And that's minimum economically speaking. And that's minimum population base is about 3 million people.
Okay, hang on.
The regions. You say, okay, Canada, United States, and Mexico.
How many people did you say?
For a regional economy to work, you need a minimum population base of 300 million to 500 million. Okay? So if you kind of look at how these economies would work, and again, it has to be regional. You can't have the United States and Australia. That's not a regional economy. So you have Canada, United States, and Mexico. So that's about 350 million. Canada is about 50, and Mexico is 130. There you have 500 million people. Then you add, that'll be like, the dollar region. Then you'd have the rest of Latin America. That'd be a peso region or whatever you want to call it. That's another 500 million people. Then you have another region, which is Paris-Berlin axis, okay? And plus the France's former African colonies, because that's the natural resources, okay? And then you're going to have China as a separate region, India as a separate region, Russia divided literally in half, geographically, in the Ural Mountains. The western part is going to be one region, and the eastern another region with the Koreas, Vietnam, and Japan. So that's going to be another, Philippines, etc. That's going to be about another 350 million people. Okay, and that leaves you England, which is what Brexit was all about. Okay, and the Arab world. And the whole thing, and again, I explain it in detail. We don't have time to talk about it in detail, but I'll explain it very quickly. Okay, BRICS was the first attempt at regionalization of global economies. Okay, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And the whole point of that regionalization was for Brazil to take the lead in Latin America to create its own region. It didn't work out. They weren't able to do that. Another attempt was Brexit. And so England, which is again, there you have the fight between the liberal banking pro-European financiers, and you have industrialists who are also, there is aristocrats. That's a different project. And behind that project, you have the Rothschilds, you have Queen of England, you have the Kabbalists. Okay, this is another project. England is a different project. And these people are winning. I'm not talking about Boris Johnson. Okay, he's a circus clown. He's nothing, he doesn't count. I'm not talking about any president of any countries. They have nothing to do with global projects, which is a supranational concern. Okay, and that would have worked with the Arab world, because you need to have a region. And so England living in Europe and not having a market, they would have joined the Arab world, which is Sunnis and Shiites, who have been at war since Prophet Muhammad was in the diapers, actually longer. And so the point is that would have worked. But for that, London needed to give the Arab world something that they could agree on, okay, along cultural, political, social, and religious, divide. And that something was the head of Israel on the platter. Israel was going to disappear. What does that mean? Well, actually, I'm not saying that. I don't want people to accuse me of being an anti-Semite. I'm not saying that. Henry Kissinger said that in 2012, and Lord Jacob Rothschild said that in 2012 as well. People can check online. New York Post interview with Henry Kissinger, where he said in 10 years, by 2022, Israel will disappear. So that would have worked. England and the Arab world offering Israel on a platter. And the whole thing, Jay, was already agreed on. The only thing that was needed for this plan to actually work is for Hillary Clinton to win the presidency. But she lost. And Trump isn't willing to do that. So the globalists, okay, the industrialists came up with Plan B. And Plan B, again, without going too much into this, it's in my book on Donald Trump. The Plan B was France with Macron. Because Macron, historically, is a carbon copy of Napoleon III. And so that was the idea. Okay, again, we don't have time to explain, but if people are interested, they can, they're seen in the book. So the point is, what we're seeing right now is a movement away from nation states to regionalization of global economies. And that's going to be, again, a stopgap. Because the next step after that, because that can work X time as they're putting together a model, we may well go to what? To city-states. Because again, if you're looking at today's world, and the smaller cities can't withstand because they're being dismantled because of the collapse, people are going to be going to bigger cities, which means the cities are going to grow to enormous proportions. And in fact, Pentagon, in one of their videos a couple of years back, they're saying that the biggest city in the world by the end of the 21st century is going to be Lagos in Nigeria, 75 million people.
Whoa.
And again, people are saying, what's this thing about city-states? Well, we already have city-states. Vatican is a city-state. Venice has always been a city-state. Singapore, Monaco, we have many examples of city-states. Okay, they existed in the Middle Ages and they exist now. And what makes it more interesting is the fact that as a city-state grows in size, you have the need for technological innovation. Right. Some of them are living like rats underground. And you already have in China, you already have in Southeast Asia, societies, entire cross sections of the population who are not urban dwellers, who are, the subterranean dwellers. Well, you're going to have those on a globalized level, except add to that this, this new technology, which everyone will have. And suddenly looking at a very unpleasant picture, because in the near future, the nuclear technology, which today is a privilege of a few countries, is going to be the weapon of choice for all the poor countries. Because every other country of the first world will use biological and bacteriological technologies to wage their wars, which is what coronavirus is all about. It was a first attempt to see how this thing works, socially, politically, metaphysically, metaphorically, on the population basis, propaganda-wise. So they're gonna fine-tune it. But what we've seen is how easy it has been for them to take away our freedom.
You said it there, man. It's pretty unbelievable to watch. That's all I can say. So one last question before we go. How far down do you think the population will drop over the next 10, 15 years? The world population. We're at 7 billion now. Where do you think we'll be in 10 years?
Well, it's probably 8 billion now, right now, maybe more, I don't know. But anyway, the point is that, again, if we can't come up with a model, the idea, like the elite, their objective is to reduce it to 1 billion people, okay? They certainly have the technology now to do this. This bacteriological biotechnology, they can kill, entire cross sections of the population based on race, color, creed, areas of planet Earth. So again, we have to decide, we the people, because there's so many more of us. Although we're needless to say, it's like, saying like, because many of us, we're stronger. Who's stronger, 1,000 wolves or 1,000,000 sheep? So who's stronger? So the point is, what we need to decide is, do we want to be part of human or inhumane civilization?
Great.
If we want to remain human, we have to remember that what makes us different is our ability to discover universal principles of nature, which improve, as a result of what? As a result of our divine spark of reason.
Right.
Okay? These elements which no machine can have, and our ability to improve the lives of people per square kilometer of space against nature. So we're going to have to decide if we want to remain a civilization of human beings based on these higher principles, or we're willing to join, this race to hell, by being completely re-engineered out, because again, in the future, they don't need us really. They only need machines, and machines are cheaper, better, easier to manage, et cetera, et cetera.
They don't rebel. Yeah, I agree with you. It's essentially, it's a spiritual war that we're in. And the bad guys want us to be removed from our spiritual sources and just be bereft of it all. And it's a sad thing. But I do agree with you. I think there is a hope for us. I think we can prevail against these forces.
We will always prevail, because we have always prevailed. And if anyone who believes in God thinks that this is the end, this is not the end. This is the end of their model. Their model is dead. Okay, we will win, although the bad guys don't know it yet.
I'm totally with you on that. I'm a very optimistic person, and I think that in some ways this may be the best thing that's ever happened, because we're finally waking up to what we're seeing. And here's the other thing, is you can't wage a struggle without the information. And that's what I'm trying to do, is get the information out, which is why I appreciate you coming on, because everyone has to understand what we're up against before we can even begin to struggle against it. So, wow. Man, you've given me a lot to think about. It's been incredible. I'd love to have you back on in a few months.
Anytime, Jay, anytime. Always available.
The most clear thinking I've heard in a long time. I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.